this was a weekend where the Big 12 really stepped up. I don't know that anybody's going to be wowed by necessarily the teams that they beat, but if you consider the out of conference play, the Big 12 is winning its fair share of matchups outside the conference. And what we had this past weekend was, of course, Kansas won against Duke, and pretty much everybody else played in conference. But looking over the last two weekends, and again, the TCU SMU matchup also comes to mind. And West Virginia beat Virginia Tech. So there's three decent matchups outside the conference, and they all went the Big 12's way. And really, when you add it all up, I've got my conference rankings out. When we just look at not necessarily what we think about these conferences, but just go strictly by the results on the field, I think the Big 12 is playing second to the SEC right now and just flat out results on the field out of conference play.
Yeah, sir, absolutely agree. I would say the same. Now, I would say when you look at top to bottom, absolutely. When you I don't know that the Big 12 has a team as good as Ohio State or Michigan at this point. Um, but but I think you're right when you look at top to bottom. I think the Big 12 is the second, playing the second best or the second toughest to SEC to the SEC, and you look at the rankings and stuff like that. Like it's mind-boggling to me that Kansas is not actually ranked, and the only reason they're not ranked is because it's Kansas.
Yeah.
Because you're 4-0, you've won. The teams that you've beaten, Houston, Houston, Duke, and West Virginia, with two of those being on the road. Yeah, so I mean, but they have an opportunity again this weekend. They host Iowa State to possibly get to 5-0, and I think they host Texas Tech the next week. So wouldn't be out of the realm of craziness here to assume that Kansas could potentially get to 6-0. But yeah, no, the Big 12, even West Virginia getting a win at Virginia Tech, as you'd mentioned there, and so the Big 12 is going to a certain degree, I think they're going to beat up on each other, to some degree through this year, and you got a big one on Saturday with Oklahoma State and Baylor as well. So that'll be interesting to see as you start to see the pecking order take place to obviously early in the first couple of weeks of the conference season. But yeah, the top to bottom, this Big 12 is playing better than probably it has in a long time.
Yeah, at this stage in the season, whether you're trying to justify a top 25, which I try to do every week when I release that and get all sorts of criticism, and that's fine, or conference rankings, there's always this game that's played when you say, well, Kansas has beaten Houston, West Virginia, and Duke. Well, how good are those teams? Who have they beaten? Well, we've only played 4 games. So really, it's hard to find a team that's beaten anyone that has beaten anyone else. There's everybody's playing a lot of FCS games in group of 5 against lower tier group of 5s. So there's only so many quality games. So you have to make some assumptions and they're reasonable assumptions, that is West Virginia great? Is Houston great? Is Duke great? No. But they're all pretty capable teams that were winning their other games, some of them. Duke came in at 3-0. They beat Northwestern. Is Northwestern any good? No. But Duke's winning its games. And so Kansas is able to win that game and really control the game. I know they only won by 8, but I caught some of that. And they seem to be in control of the game. And all the action I saw,
Yeah.
Kansas was winning every play of that game. Again, Houston, if Houston's good enough to take Texas Tech to overtime, then they're pretty good. And Kansas beat them by 3 scores on the road. And then West Virginia. Is West Virginia great? No, they're not a great team. Probably will not contend in the Big 12, but they're a top 50 team in the country. I don't think there's any question about that. They're in that range. They were good enough to go to Pitt, throw the ball down to the 1 yard line to try to go to overtime. So you got to be a pretty capable, talented team to play some of these results. And if Kansas is winning those games against those opponents that have proven at least to be competitive against decent teams, then I don't get it either. I don't understand. It's difficult to find 3 wins for anybody in the country that are that good. And that's why I've got Kansas ranked in the top 10.
Yeah.
And while people flip out, understand, I don't believe that they're one of the 10 best teams in the country, but I believe that their resume is one of the 10 best right now.
Yeah,
But
yeah, absolutely. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I'm sorry, Jason, 25-5 for the Big 12. That's their out of conference record. And yeah, just like every other conference, that's padded with a lot of cake games, but that's with every conference. And most of these other conferences have lost 10 and 12 games outside the conference. And again, for the Big 12, it's 25-5. It's 7-4 against the Power Five. It's 10-1 against the Group of Five. So they've dominated the Group of Five, which they should. And of course, the one loss was Kansas State against Tulane. But I think it's been a really strong season for the Big 12. And they have 2 significant near misses with Texas, Bama, and Baylor, BYU. Or it could really be an outstanding run outside the conference.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. And as you mentioned, in Kansas' game against Duke, just to go back on that one, yeah, I watched a large majority of that one as well. And Kansas, you're right, Kansas controlled the game pretty much throughout. Um, wasn't really from my perspective. I don't know that the game was really ever in doubt on the Kansas side. So yeah, we'll see how that continues. Jalen Daniels is playing at a very high level for them um, at quarterback. 11 touchdown passes, only 1 interception. I think he's got over 300 yards rushing on the season. So um, when you start getting really high quality quarterback play, that changes things. I think I was just looking here against Duke, 19 out of 23, 328 yards, 4 touchdowns through the air. So, like I said, he's playing at a high level, and they are playing at a high level on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, they're still struggling. They don't have the athletes, but they're going to be able to not only be in some of these games, win some of these games, but keep a lot of them close just because of how good they're performing on the offensive side of the ball. And you look up and down, like I said, when you look up and down the Big 12 roster, you look at, I think a lot of people thought West Virginia and Texas Tech right now are probably the two the worst teams in the conference. And Texas Tech upsets Texas on Saturday, and as we mentioned, West Virginia goes to Virginia Tech and wins that game. And really, again, very much like Kansas. I mean, the game ended up being um, pretty significant just in terms of the point spread towards the end of the game. But even early on, West Virginia pretty much controlled that game from second half for the entire second half. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting conference race. And Iowa State even they played Baylor tough, um, got down big, but then came back. And so I don't. It's going to be one of those things where um, it's going to be a tough game every Saturday. There's no weekends off from here on out for sure.